Hello, everyone, and welcome. At this time, we are scheduled for Rising Upward with the Nonviolent Environmental Movement with Arvind Perandjapei. On behalf of Northwest Veg and our sponsors, including Book Publishing Company, the Stanford Inn by the Sea, Portland Mercury, and Vegetarian, tearing it up one tea at a time, welcome and thank you again for attending. Please turn off your cell phones and refrain from taking videos or pictures during the presentation. VegFest is just one of dozen events that Northwest Veg hosts each year. If you are excited by VegFest, you can help support it and all of our outreach by stopping by the Northwest Veg membership tables just inside the entrance at the exhibitor hall and becoming a member. Plus, when you join during VegFest today, we will thank you with a swag bag filled with products and coupons provided by our exhibitors. Arvind Perandjapei co-founded and hosts UnitedInHeart.com, a vegan blog and three-part video series that explains the climate emergency and the timely vegan restoration that will sequester enough carbon to halt climate change. He hosts a free weekly meditation group in the Portland area through the Blue Mountain Center of Meditation. Arvin received his master's degree in biotechnology from Johns Hopkins University and his law degree from Washington University in St. Louis. Arvin believes that perhaps the greatest discovery of our time is that we can halt climate change through veganism if we spread the word fast enough. So please help me in welcoming Arvind Perandjapei.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And thank you for joining me today and for extricating yourself from the exhibition hall. We're going to have a lot of fun today, and I promise that this topic is far more adventurous than any passing pleasure your palate can offer. This talk will outline a way forward to end exploitation and create connectedness. We will be drawing upon great mystics such as Buddha and Gandhi on the one hand, and scientific facts from the environmental sciences on the other, to fashion a key that, if we choose to use it, will open up a whole new world. I would like to begin by telling a story. Actually, I told this story to a summer camp of girls from the ages of 6 to 9 years old, and it was a hit. Now, this demographic is just a bit older, just a tiny bit older. But try it on for size, you may like it. 2,600 years ago, in a fertile valley kingdom, below the foothills of the Himalayas, 2 princes were practicing their archery. The older one, Siddhartha, grew up to become the man known as the Buddha. The younger one was his cousin, Devadatta. Devadatta, let's see if I can, there we go. Devadatta spied a beautiful swan flying overhead. He aimed and he shot it. The swan came tumbling down to the ground and was writhing in pain, back and forth, trembling all over in agony. The 2 princes ran to the swan, and Siddhartha got there first. He carefully took the arrow out and protectively held the swan away from his younger cousin. "Hand me the swan," yelled Devadatta. "I will not. The swan belongs to me. I want him for my cooking pot." "You shall not hurt him," was Siddhartha's reply. This wasn't the first time that the 2 princes were at odds. They decided to take their dispute to the king's court, and they rushed over and interrupted court proceedings. Devadatta at this time, he stood tall, and he said, "King Shuddhodana, look here. Siddhartha has what is rightfully mine." The swan belonged to no one. I saw it. Flying in the air, I was the first one to see it. I am the one who brought it down to earth with my arrow. I shot it. The swan belongs to me. Now this surprised King Shuladana, for even at an early age, Siddhartha was known for his nobility. Is this true, Siddhartha? What do you have to say for yourself? Father, to whom does the swan belong? To the one who tries to kill it, or to the one who tries to save it? This brilliant question, asked by a boy about 12 years old, remains incorrectly answered even to this day. But rather than answer, King Shuladana, by way of reply, looked to his wise counselors. They huddled up. For as old as the law, first in time meant first in right. If you were the first one to cut the tree down, then the lumber is yours. First to hook a fish or to hunt an animal. It seemed that this legal principle would win the day. But then another principle was raised, and further discussions ensued. Finally, they were ready to provide their holding. King Shuladana, there is no law higher than nonviolence. Protecting and loving life is the highest law. The swan belongs to Siddhartha. And at this point in the story, the 6-year-olds cheered and cheered and cheered. There's a sheer joy in it. Or in other words, protecting and loving life is not only the law of life or the Dharma, but there's great joy in it, for it brings meaning to life. Now, stated very differently in different terms, seeing the needs of the whole is the opposite of egotism. And acting in accordance with the needs of the whole and never at the expense of others is the Dharma, or law of life. This way of living is the key to opening the gate to a whole new world. A world based on sustainability, peace, love, and understanding. Conversely, if we disregard the needs of the whole and we act at the expense of others, we increase exploitation. Human exploitation, animal exploitation, and environmental destruction. I think this is partly what Gandhi meant when he said, I believe that if one person gains spiritually, that the whole world gains with him or her. And if one person falls spiritually, the whole world falls to that extent. Please allow me to introduce a metaphor. They say in boxing, and I know nothing of boxing, nothing, but they say in boxing that a boxer will have a tough go of it until he or she understands the opponent. The same goes with exploitation. Switching metaphors, but continuing along that line of thinking, we see 4 alarm fires. Sorry, there we go. We see 4 alarm fires in world hunger, water scarcity, climate change, environmental destruction, and inequality. And I have deep admiration for those who are working to put out those flames. But we don't realize that it is we ourselves who are feeding the fire-breathing dragon, day in and day out. United in Heart and another organization, Climate Healers, are 2 organizations that want to starve out the fire-breathing dragon. It is our assertion that a few simple lifestyle changes will end world hunger and halt climate change. I know this is a tall claim, but I have scientific support to indicate that the global significance of the vegan imperative is misunderstood. And in my humble opinion, a vast city of wisdom lies behind every great wall of misconception. When a person asks me, "Why are you vegan?" I choose to answer the question that they should be asking. I used to eat meat, dairy, and eggs because I didn't understand the consequences of my own actions. You see, disconnectedness from the consequences of our actions is the basis of ignorance. Conversely, knowledge in action is the highest wisdom. And these are some of the most favorite lines of Gandhi from what's called the Bhagavad Gita, which are a compilation of statements from Krishna. So, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is I'd like to put up a chart, a table, to illustrate the global consequences of eating meat, dairy, and eggs. It's a busy table, so... Oh, whoops, there's the dragon. Okay, so it's a busy table, and down the left side, that first column, you have earth, water, and fire. Earth relates to land use, water, and then fire relates to the burning of fuels, so carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And along the top, you have 2010 to 2018, which is essentially present-day data, and 2030, which are those numbers come from scientific projections from reputable organizations. So we'll run through this, and we'll start there where it says 2009, 6 million kids. The World Health Organization reported that in 2009 alone, 6 million children died of starvation. In 2010, we fed our animals 5 times as much food as we fed ourselves, and we fed them almost 50% of the grain on Earth. And any land that's used to feed animals, to produce meat, dairy, and eggs, can be used to create 5 to 15 times as much food. 5 to 15 times as much vegan food. Or in other words, the standard American diet requires about 10 times as much land and 10 times as much crops as the vegan diet. As Margaret Mead put it, pigs and cows and chickens and people are all competing for grain. Now, I know I haven't gotten very far in this table, but I have to, out of respect for those children, I have to spend a little bit of time on this and explain this out. Do you remember We Are the World and the African famines of the 1980s? Thousands of children in Ethiopia were dying of starvation. Meanwhile, at the very same time, Ethiopia was using a significant amount of their land to grow cereal grains to feed European livestock. Food scarcity is a land use problem. It is not a human population problem or a logistical problem. Okay, well, I actually should, let me continue. So it's really a land use problem. And I want to perhaps drive the point home. Swami Vivekananda pointed out in clear terms 125 years ago that we're all sisters and brothers, right? And I have no angst for anyone. But I do have something to say on behalf of the impoverished brown, black, and tan children of the global South and the East. There's nothing more deplorable, more hideous than the starvation of one child, let alone a Holocaust of 6 million children every year. It has to stop. Speaking up against meat, dairy, and eggs is okay, because it has to stop. And no matter what anyone says to you, it is always okay to speak up for the voiceless and the vulnerable. The reason that so many children are dying of starvation is that there are about 900 million people at the brink of starvation. My wife and I, we don't want to support a system that perpetuates, essentially it's a separate but equal system that perpetuates extreme inequality. So we laid out the principal drivers of food scarcity on our website. And we explain that we can create food abundance if we engage in a simple lifestyle change, which is local, organic, vegan eating, LOVE. Love food. So perhaps moving on in the table if we can ever get through it. In 2018, so presently, we are on pace, unfortunately, to kill 78 billion animals a year. Which means that every day we're killing about 210 million animals. And every day we are stealing young baby animals from their mothers about 210 million times a day. That number is higher than when it was at 2010. So you see those other numbers of 2010. 2010, we killed about 62 billion land animals a year, that year. So it's gone up significantly, 16 billion animals in the last 8 years. I have a lot of respect and deep admiration for the vegan movement and for all the wise voices and tremendous spirit that we have at this conference and in the vegan community in general. And I always learn from fellow vegans. But you can see that the trajectory is still not in the correct direction. Moving down to water, 2030 in water, if we go to that cell. The UN came out with a report in 2015 that projected that if we continue with business as usual, we will see a 40% water shortage globally. That's horrible, of course, but I'm going to try to move through these numbers relatively quickly so we can cover everything. In 2020, and as far as another report in 2015, Nestle, the world's largest food producer, they also put in a report. It was a confidential report at the time, but it's been released on WikiLeaks, that they were projecting that by 2025 we would see a 33% water shortage. And in fact, according to WikiLeaks, the report stated the following. Okay, so now this is according to the report. A calorie of meat requires 10 times as much water to produce as a calorie of food crops. As the world's growing middle classes eat more meat, the Earth's water resources will be dangerously squeezed. In addition, as some of you may already know, there's quite a bit of water pollution that's involved with animal agriculture. In the United States, animal agriculture creates 7 million pounds of excrement a minute. And this gets into lagoons, and it can leak into freshwater systems. So it's more than just water use, it's also water pollution. And since it's using 10 times as much land, you also have 10 times as much pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, right? Okay, so to 2010 to 2018, The water stresses have already begun. 2.7 billion people find water scarce for 1 month or more per year. And as a result, 2.4 billion people are afflicted by poor water sanitation. As a result, sadly, 2 million people die a year from diarrheal diseases due to poor water sanitation. Dropping down to the bottom right, 2030 for the projections on gigatons of carbon. The thought is that if we exceed 565 gigatons of carbon, we'll almost certainly go beyond 2 degrees Celsius, plus 2 degrees Celsius, and if so, we'll melt the ice, potentially all of the ice. And according to 350.org, if we continue with business as usual, then we will exceed 565 gigatons of carbon by 2030. And to give you some perspective, there's 1,500 gigatons of carbon in the northern hemisphere. That's more than twice as much that's up in the atmosphere. It's just a tremendous amount of carbon. It's very, very dangerous if all of that gets up into the atmosphere. And if we were to look at present day, from 1750 to 2016, we humans released 240 gigatons of carbon. And in the year of 2015, we traversed a threshold. It's one of the 9 planetary boundaries, 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide up in the atmosphere. And the thought is that if we go past it, then potentially we sort of release a runaway train, so to speak. Well, unfortunately, we did shoot past that. There are wide-ranging estimates, but most climate scientists agree that animal agriculture is responsible for 18 to 30% of the carbon dioxide equivalent every year. Now, I know this is quite bleak. Here's my promise to you. All of these problems, even climate change, can be addressed with a few simple lifestyle choices. As we learn more and uncover more about these problems, we uncover revelations that serve as living waters of hope. In Hinduism and in Buddhist philosophy, they say that same samskara, which means bad habit, that same bad habit that knocked you over and held you down is the very one to overcome. For by doing so, you will rise up. Or in other words, our greatest weaknesses will become our greatest strengths. And our most horrible defeats will give way to our most stunning victories. All right. So my life changed forever when I met this person 1.5 years ago, Sailesh Rao. He's the executive director of Climate Healers, and he made one of the greatest discoveries of our time. He and his scientific collaborators discovered that vegan reforestation can capture 265 gigatons of carbon in a relatively short amount of time. That's, again, more than the 240 gigatons of carbon that we've released from 1750 to 2016. Veganism requires 1/10 the amount of land as the standard American diet. And so if we all switched to veganism, there'd be a lot of extra land. If you rewild 41% of that extra land, you capture 265 gigatons of carbon. So how long does it take? Well, in 2002, this forest in Rajasthan, India, looked pretty depleted. It was turning into desert. And that's what happens when animals graze at the and forage at all the grasses and all the roots below. They start to turn it into desert. So what people did was they built a wall wherein animals were not allowed to graze into that forest. And they also told the nearby villagers that they could not cut down the branches from these trees because, again, this is a national forest. So within 4 years, it turned into this. Now, all that mass, all that green you see there, that's biomass, and it's pulling down carbon from the atmosphere, right? So it can actually happen in a very short amount of time. But there were animals that were involved as well. We can do this if there's still animals around. If we continue our extinction rates, then at some point we're going to miss that critical component of the ecosystem, and it will be harder, much harder, to rewild this quickly. Okay, so there you see vegan reforestation, 265 gigatons of carbon. I promise that there's hope. Sailesh Rao presented this information to the European Parliament, and quite persuasively, in my opinion. But the trouble is that the political leaders, the legislators, they wanted to get reelected more than they wanted to push the vegan imperative, the vegan movement. So it hasn't taken a hold, has not. But when he did address them, he introduced himself as a salesman of ahimsa. Ahimsa means nonviolence. So a salesman about nonviolence. And I think it's important to weave nonviolence back into this story because there's so much we can learn from the nonviolence community. Gandhi, he coined a term called heart unity. It means empathetically seeing the needs of the whole. Empathetically caring for the welfare of others. And he built constructive programs based on heart unity. You see, Gandhi had a much deeper understanding than most of us. He saw right through the caste system. If you believe in inferiority, then you also believe in superiority. It happens automatically. In essence, Indians had laid the groundwork for the British to come in and claim superiority. It's karma, not by magic or mysterious means or a vindictive God, simply by the cause and effect of clinging to a psychology of superiority. Similarly, today, we operate in a separate but equal system that perpetuates extreme inequality, wherein we are disconnected from the consequences of our actions. You see, disconnectedness has become a habit. It's the reason why our political leaders are not introducing bold initiatives in the wake of frantic warning calls on climate change. Thus, disconnectedness may bring about our demise. But again, not from a vindictive God or mysterious means, but simply the cause and effect of clinging to a psychology of disconnectedness. Gandhi, his principal constructive program was a local, organic, homespun cloth program, right? Based on heart unity. And so similarly, what I suggest is that vegan eating, in particular, local, organic, vegan eating, based on connectedness, should be our principal constructive program to get us out. Connectedness is sort of a term I'm defining here as seeing the needs of the whole, cooperating with others to address the needs of the whole, and never acting at the expense of others. Our website explains how a few lifestyle changes can end world hunger and halt climate change. But I left out one critical point. If everyone in this room goes vegan and reduces their carbon footprint, we're still not going to solve this global problem. And therein lies the rub. Has anyone ever tried to get someone else vegan? How did that go? Yeah, right. Well, Sailesh Rao is one of the best speakers. And that's right, and that's where I'm getting going, is that there's communication problems. Sailesh Rao is one of the best speakers on veganism and the environment. And I thought, surely everyone in his family must be vegan, right? So I asked him, Sailesh, have you talked to your family about how we all have to go vegan? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, well, how many first-order relatives do you have in the sense of sons, parents, brothers, sisters, but even cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles, etc.? He said, well, I have a big family, about 40. Okay, 40. So out of the 40, how many of them went vegan? And he said 6. 6 out of 40, that's 15%. I refer to that as transmission loss. And if that rate continues, if that holds constant for all of us, then we're in deep trouble, right? Similarly, there's this other problem, what I call transmission time. Oh, there we go, constructed program. Transmission time. It took me 1.5 years to become a vegan advocate. If it takes everybody 1.5 years, then we're not going to be successful, because it has to spread. The word has to spread much faster than that, right? It's a rate-limiting step. So, and then lastly, lost in translation, which is, I guess, self-explanatory. One final point with respect to the transmission time problem. We are in the midst of an environmental emergency. You've already seen the timelines. So I have an analogy to make. If your house is on fire, now this is Sailesh Rao's house, and it is on fire. He was okay, no one got hurt, completely unscathed, but it's kind of funny, that's his house. If your house is on fire, you don't continue on with business as usual. And you don't knock people over as you exit. And you certainly don't quietly exit without urging your loved ones out the door too. Similarly, there's no time to waste. Time is of the essence. We have to urge others right away. The message has to get out quickly. So, my wife and I, we created a training program at United in Heart to hopefully address these communication problems, such as the conversion problem of talking to your family and friends and them not going vegan. We posted 2 free videos. One is of Sailesh Rao giving a talk, and another is by Richard Oppenlander. No registration required and none of the hoops and all that business. And 5 short articles. And the idea behind the articles is to fully inform people very quickly and concisely, and then let them, in the 5th article, we allow individuals, we suggest that they make goals. So goals facilitate goal setting. And as far as how do we go about this, we encourage you reaching out to your family and friends and organizing video discussion groups, wherein the first meeting, you watch a video, and then you discuss it as a group. You come back, second meeting, watch the second video, discuss it as a group, and then before the 3rd meeting, you read the 5 articles, write down your goals, and then share your goals in the 3rd meeting, and that's all the 3rd meeting is sharing goals and discussing it. You learn, actually, you'd be quite surprised, I learned quite a bit in that goals discussion period, because everyone is unique and they bring very creative ideas, and they're all welcome. And I found myself writing down a number of other people's goals for myself. So we did a pilot run wherein 7 non-vegans were part of this. And so 7 non-vegans were invited. Of the 7, 4 turned vegan, and 2 additional spouses, individuals that were not invited, 2 spouses also turned vegan. And the 3 that did not go vegan, they became reducitarians. As far as renewables, 3 of them were passionate about switching to almost all renewable energy and reducing their energy footprint. And with respect to communication, 5 of them felt comfortable as vegan advocates who simply initiate more video discussion groups. And a subset of those individuals actually were very passionate about getting the message out online and through public presentations. So we think this was actually relatively successful, significantly better than 15%. We had sort of like 6 out of 7 go vegan. So we think that this is a good format. It's non-confrontational. None of the language in the articles is like browbeating. Like, yeah, it's all very respectful, and people are welcome to bring whatever goals they want. There's no such thing as a right or wrong answer because these are all personal goals. And I would say that the only real house rule is there's no judging, accusing, or blaming. I refer to that as jabbing. Right? Judge, accuse, blame. No judging, accusing, and blaming. Because that just pushes people away, and that's not nonviolence, right? So we feel like it does address transmission loss. It reduces the transmission time to 0 because even if you're not fully read up on all this material, you can simply press play, right? You can teach people, you can facilitate those conversations and press play for the videos. And then it serves as a catalyst and guide for goal setting. The goal setting is around 3 things: food, energy use, and communication. Now there's a reason why those 3 were picked. Obviously communication, because we have to get the word out, and obviously food. But the background is that these 3 are drivers for change. About 500,000 years ago was the hunter-gatherer revolution, and there was the advent of fire. Fire was a new form of energy, and it allowed for a new form of food, right? Hunted and cooked meat. And there was a new form of communication that came about around the same time too, which was a more sophisticated form of communication, of talking, speaking. So that was back 500,000 years ago. 12,000 years ago was the agricultural revolution. And you had the advent of cultivated gardens as a new form of food. You had animal energy, harnessing animals' energy to plow the fields. And you also had the advent of written language around that time. About 250 years ago was the Industrial Revolution with fossil fuels, livestock, and the printing press. Notice for all 3 of these, you had wealth aggregation, you had tremendous aggregation of power within a very small number of hands, because not everyone owned a printing press, so just a small number of people did, and they could communicate to the masses. But now we all have access to the internet, and we can all blog, we can all Facebook and etc. and communicate via the web. Solar power is available to all, renewable energy is available to all, and veganism as a new form of food. And we believe that these 3 will drive the great transition. So if we are very intentful about our goals, we can bring this about as in a timely manner, as we'd like it to happen, as opposed to us kicking and screaming after tremendous loss of life and hardship. So, like I said, personal goals, diet, energy, communication, local organic vegan eating, renewables, and spreading the word through the internet. It's outlined in the 5th article. Now, I guess I would say that at this point in time, I would say that if we were to look up at the scoreboard, we don't have a lot of time. Maybe we have about 2 to 8 years. It's anybody's guess as to our time window for actually changing the trajectory of things. We're down 3-0. We have to score 3 goals to tie it up, right? Diet, communication, and energy use. And if we do, it's not game over. We're delicately hanging in the balance. As a final note, I wanted to draw upon Buddha. He says famously in the twin verses, "Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought." And for evil, substitute the word harmful, because moral and immoral are obsolete terms, right? Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draw it. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought like a shadow that never leaves. You can see the parallels with what Buddha is saying here in our situation. If we disregard the suffering and hardship of impoverished people and animals, then animal agriculture will bring about environmental destruction and eventually turmoil and loss of human life. But if we go vegan, we will use 10 times less water and land, we'll rewild land, and nature will reestablish ecosystems, sequester 265 gigatons of carbon, and regenerate itself. In essence, we hold the key to living in a wondrous, compassionate universe. All we have to do is turn the key. Thank you very much. Thank you.